So let's start with yesterday's news. How did Biden do? What's your sense of the summit, its achievements, what it didn't achieve?
I mean, I think he did about as well as he could, which is, you're not going to change Vladimir Putin. You're not going to fundamentally fix all of these issues where we have problems with him. And the trajectory has been steadily getting worse there for a long time. And so if you look at cyber attacks, if you look at the disinformation campaigns and efforts to undermine our own democracy, if you look at the increasingly brutal repression of the opposition there, and I talked to Alexei Navalny for this book, you look at Ukraine. I mean, the list is just mounted in terms of Putin's disregard for American opinion or the opinion of the democratic world. And I think what Biden was hoping to do is essentially see if he could test whether it was possible to arrest the escalatory cycle that he found himself in with Russia at the outset of his presidency, to lay down, I think, in pretty general terms, here are our interests. Here's a set of warnings. Essentially, if you continue this kind of activity, you're going to face a certain amount of consequences from us, and just use that to kind of measure progress 6 months from now, a year from now. I thought he was very wise in his press conference to not overly raise expectations that there's going to be a significant change out of Russia. I don't know that it dramatically alters the trajectory of events. I think it's worth testing whether a face-to-face meeting in which you kind of lay down at the beginning of your presidency your view of a whole range of issues makes sense to do. I think ultimately they're probably going to be managing though a Putin who's going to do what he's going to do, and they're just going to have to try to contain that, and mitigate the consequences.
There were competing views, as you know, Ben, about whether it made sense for Biden to have this meeting at all. Leonid Volkov, who's Alexei Navalny's chief of staff, said to a number of us that he thought basically Putin just wanted a selfie with Biden
Yeah.
to take home as a trophy. Biden himself, in the run up to this meeting, seemed to be working very hard to speak to the part of Putin that has that heavy chip on his shoulder, wants so much to be taken seriously. I thought his comment before the meeting that he'd be with a worthy adversary was almost, you know, amazing piece of contrived flattery to set him up on the pedestal where he'd like to be. Was that smart, and was it smart to do this meeting and appeal to that vanity in Putin in the first place?
I'm not sure. Again, I really had to, for this book. I really tried to inhabit the Putin worldview, and I did it through the experience of people like Alexei Navalny or Zhana Nemtsova, whose father Boris Nemtsov was killed in the shadow of the Kremlin. People who've suffered the tip of the spear of Putin's repression, but also going back to the beginning of Putinism, really. And kind of what I found is you have kind of two strains to this. One is quite simple. Vladimir Putin would like to be very wealthy and very powerful, and it's as simple as that. And so everything he does, to some extent, is about maintaining that control, that dominance of Russia, its political life, and its natural resources. And that's what Navalny was ingenious at pointing out, just the kind of core corruption to this whole project, that the ideology that Putin wraps around it is kind of the justification for the core project, which is just his own power. I do think, related to that, there's a worldview that suggests that Putin wants Russia to be obviously taken seriously on the world stage, and there's a line that I kind of feel is at the kind of core of Putinism. He gave this speech after Beslan, which I go back to, the horrific terrorist event in 2004, which scores of Russian children were killed, and he said, he basically chastised the Russian people for what had happened with the collapse of the Soviet Union, what had happened through the kind of chaotic freewheeling 90s. And he said, we were weak and the weak are beaten. And I think that's like the core of Putinism right there. that you never show weakness, the weak are beaten. And so I agree that he wants to be on the world stage. He wants to be seen as a co-equal to the American president. But I'm not sure you can appeal in some way that is in any way new to his vanity, his desire for relevancy. Putin wants to be relevant on Putin's terms. And so if I had any issues, I think it was smart to do the summit. I got a little uncomfortable with the degree of pomp around it. Geneva, this kind of famous diplomatic venue, obviously the media frenzy, which was inevitable when you have the summit. Again, on balance, I think it was smart to do because you should, at the beginning of your presidency, with a big important country like Russia, lay down like what your thinking is. And by the way, if they can at least just get some conversations going on nuclear weapons, let's not forget that's really important. But I don't think you're going to change Putin or find some new way to appeal to him. He's dealt with three very different American presidents in Bush, Obama, and Trump. He's basically been the same person through that. I don't think there's some formula that is going to have a bigger impact on his personality.